welcome. You're watching FYI. I'm Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor. Now, our series on cyber security got such a massive response from all of you, and then you wrote to me saying you want more of it. You want to know more about how we can win back the privacy in our phones. Our phones shouldn't be governing our lives, and it should actually be the other way around. So today on the program, we've got solutions for you. Changes that you can make in your phone, things that can be done very easily once you're aware of it, to ensure the data is not mined freely by iOSs, by Wi-Fi's, by even apps, the very notorious apps. So today on the program, we'll be taking you through all of them with our experts who will tell you exactly what to do to win back the privacy on your phone. All right. Let's begin by quickly giving you an idea about the ways in which your data is actually mined. And we'll get that graphic up on the screen also for you. Basically, on your phone, there are three ways in which your data can be mined. One is through the iOS settings, which is basically how your phone is functioning on the whole. The second is your Wi-Fi settings. And third are the apps. You have to give permission at all three levels for these companies to start getting into and mining your data. So if you make systematic changes on all these three fronts, you can significantly bring down the amount of data that is going freely without any money that they pay us for it or anything of that sort, without even our permission mostly, that they end up taking. So if you're aware of these changes, you'll be able to block this data from going in their hands. All right, so let's talk about the first two. Let's talk about the changes that can be made in your iOS settings and then also on your Wi-Fi. For that, we've got Amit Dubey joining us. Good morning, Amit. Always good to have you on the program. We've been discussing about this for quite a few days now, and lots of viewers wrote to me and said, okay, now we understand what is happening and how data is being mined. We now want to know what can we do. So take us through the changes that one can make in their phone settings first.
Yeah, so am I audible, Sonal? Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, see, as you have mentioned, there are three ways through which any such company can peep into your data, either through your mobile application, your device, your browser, or through your Wi-Fi. So we have to put our setting conditions in such a way that any such leakage should not happen. On top of that, there is one more thing through which you can open your windows for such data access is when you are installing any application and they ask you to do use single sign-on features, like they ask you to sign on through Google or Facebook. So you are always asked, like, you can log in to this application either through Facebook or Gmail account, and you don't want to create a new account, you don't want to remember multiple passwords, so you normally allow that app through that already existing account. But when you allow such thing, you also allow that particular app to access all those things. Those are given as a permission to Google and Facebook, like your camera, microphone, location, everything. So because Google and Facebook, anyway, they have most of your permissions, you eventually unknowingly allow that third-party app as well for all those permissions, and they get that access and they get that data. So whenever you try to use any such single sign-on feature, please remember to remove those permissions from that third-party app. Similarly, when you are...
so you're suggesting that a separate login be created for these apps as well?
Either you should create separate login, or you should consciously disable that particular app to not use any such access, to not actually, because you can do it. You can go into your settings, then you can choose applications over there, and for every applications, what all permissions they have taken, that will be shown to you in a list. You can simply disable that permission.
We'll get back to applications in just a bit, right? We'll get back to applications because that's a major chunk of how your data actually goes out of your hands. We'll come back to that in just a bit. But Amit, wanted to focus on your browser settings and the Wi-Fi settings first.
So see, Wi-Fi, first of all, because Wi-Fi is inherently vulnerable, anybody can hack your Wi-Fi through brute force attack. They can keep on trying multiple passwords, and because our mobile phone is quite capable to try out like multiple thousands and 10,000s of passwords in a minute, so that's why any Wi-Fi can be hacked. Now, how can you save it? By having a very strong password, first of all. Second, Your Wi-Fi SSID should not be your name or your husband's name or your kid's name, because that way any hacker could easily identify which one is your Wi-Fi and they can target you easily. So that name should be some other thing, some random thing, so that nobody can make out if there are hundreds of Wi-Fis around, which one belongs to you. That is one thing. Second, your Wi-Fi should be password should be strong. Third thing, your encryption method should be WPA2. So there are multiple level of encryptions. You can choose in your router settings any such encryption method. So the maximum level of encryption you can allow. There may be some performance issues because of that, but that is okay, because nowadays there's no bandwidth problems and we have enough speed. So you should always try out the maximum level of encryption in your Wi-Fi settings. These three things you should do. And then you can also do one more thing, like if you are using 10 or 8 devices in your home, you can, in your router settings, you can just allow those 8 devices. There is a feature where you can mention about those 8 devices, their MAC IDs, and then you can restrict your Wi-Fi only to those devices. So even if somebody tries to hack your Wi-Fi, they will not be able to use it, because inherently you have restricted it only to those 8 devices. So that way you can secure your Wi-Fi. Second, your browser settings.
But this can be done if all your devices are a particular, say they're all Mac or they're iOS, or this can be done on multiple brands as well?
This you can do on any device, So router will allow you to recognize this device. You can scan and you can simply select that, okay, these are my devices, and otherwise it should not be allowed to any other device.
And when you say somebody can hack your Wi-Fi, it's not just the data and the bandwidth that they're using, they could actually get access to your devices as well?
Yes. So once they have the access of your Wi-Fi, they can actually mirror most of your devices. They can do man-in-the-middle attack. And this man-in-the-middle attack means they can mediate the communication which is happening between the server and your device. So they can see your password, they can see your browser history, they can actually see your all sensitive communication which you are doing through Wi-Fi. If it is not encrypted, they'll be able to see it. So that's why this is very dangerous. They can even run something on your device. If they are connected to your Wi-Fi, they can remotely execute something to your iPhone or Mac systems, or even Android systems. So that's why hacking a Wi-Fi and penetrating to any system is the most dangerous thing which can happen to any organization or to any house even.
Right. So I want to take a viewer question at this point. Amit, I have somebody writing to me. What about Wi-Fi acceptance that we give if we say check into a hotel or we check into a corporate Wi-Fi? What happens then?
See, normally most of these Wi-Fi, those are in advanced hotels. They are not open. They always restrict it through a proxy server. And when you request that particular thing from a hotel, and you connect to that Wi-Fi, they open a page where you have to put your last name and the hotel like room number, and then only it will be allowed. So that way they map your identity with the access device, that okay, who is accessing this Wi-Fi. But there are many such hotels and restaurants and many such places where they just give you the password. Now these are dangerous because these passwords can be used by anybody else. And moreover, even if somebody is using this for a criminal purpose, sometimes to trace that person back is really difficult, because they might be using virtual numbers, they might be using stolen devices, so their real identities are always hidden. So if you give them an access of because anybody, if they want to commit a crime, they just need two things: network and a device. If the device is stolen, their IMEI is like mapped to some other person's name, and the network is
and the acceptance that you give. So can that be controlled?
We have a Wi-Fi.
Are you then suggesting that we not use these Wi-Fis which could be vulnerable and stick to your mobile data in that case?
You should not do any sensitive or banking, especially communication, when you are accessing any such free Wi-Fi, because if that Wi-Fi is hacked, you will also be hacked. You will also be trapped into that hacking scenario. So you should not become a part of it. First of all, that is a vulnerability that is always there. Second thing, there is a Cyber Cafe Act in place, and according to that, if anybody is giving Wi-Fi access to anybody, they have to keep record of that person, their at least their identity, the mobile number or email ID, something, which normally we are not doing. We think like this act is only for the organizations; those are like responsible enough, but this act is applicable only to your household Wi-Fi. If you are giving this Wi-Fi to somebody, someone close to you or your friend or any visitor, you should always keep a record of it, because you don't know what they have done. If they have done anything wrong, the owners will be of yours. So you should be conscious about it.
Sure. Some very useful tips actually on what to do with your Wi-Fi settings and your browser settings as well. Let's move to the third one, and perhaps the most notorious of all. We're talking about the ways in which these apps like Amazon, like Google, like Facebook, Instagram, and even the ones which have become a rage during the lockdown. Now, lots of you who've been at home, lots of games have become a rage during the lockdown. Ludo, King, and several others that people have hooked on to. Now, these apps also mine your data. Let's put that graphic up for our viewers as well. NDTV, along with experts, picked out these 10 apps which are mining your data, taking away permissions like your microphone, your camera, your other details at this point, when really it's not required. Why should Ludo King, for example, be listening in to what you're saying? And what do they do with all this permission as well? So let's put out that data, those top 10 apps that we've got for you. They include, you'll be amazed at how much information they actually give. I was, at least. There's apps like Ghana, apps like JioSaavn, Temple Run, Share It, Like, Tinder, House Party, all have taken over, especially during the time of the lockdown. So what you have to do when it comes to these apps is actually go back to your settings, and you have that picture on the screen as well. Just keep disabling the access that you're giving to these apps. The default settings is that they get this access, so you have to go back and ensure that you're disabling all this on your phone. And this is key. This has really been like an eye-opener for me about just the amount of access that these apps have in our lives. And you're not even talking about the big players in the game. You're talking about all these little apps that we don't know, and we just get used to it, and we find it extremely harmless. Talking about that, let me bring in our other guests this morning. We've got Snehanshu Gandhi, Viraj Gupta, Saurabh Sachin as well. Let me bring in Saurabh at this point. Now, he's somebody who's the creator of Flipkart Marketplace as well. Saurabh, I firstly want to understand from you, what business do these apps have, especially, for example, Ludo King or Flipkart or Amazon, for example, of listening to me? What are they doing with all this access from our phones?
Hi, Sonal. So, first of all, the accesses are of two different kinds. One, which you authorize, and the second, which are unauthorized. Okay. So, so now the authorized ones, we only give the access. We allow the access to these apps to get our data. Now, we must understand that privacy divulged in exchange of significant value is sensible. For example, you cannot use a mapping app without sharing your location. You cannot use Uber, Ola, apps like these without sharing your location. So you have to divulge your privacy, but it's creating significant value for you. But second point is that the information used should be for intended and consented purpose. Meaning, say if somebody wants to fill the OTP automatically, for that they need SMS access. Now that SMS access should not then later on end up into all my SMSs getting uploaded, because SMSs have a lot of very important information. For example, my bank balances, where am I spending my money, and all of that. So it should be used only for intended and consented purposes. So in your program, what you showed just a while ago, that's very important. How to protect yourself from this kind of problems, this kind of privacy issues, is that go to settings, apps and notifications, and keep disabling those things. Thankfully, it's all consolidated at one place, and you can easily make out when the app is having access which it should not have. The second type of challenges are with unauthorized access. With unauthorized accesses, now enough safety is there in both iOS and Android, but we sometimes make reckless choices and we open the doorway for such apps to kind of compromise our privacy.
Because they lure us with simplicity. They lure us by saying, oh, you just have to click it once and you'll have access throughout. And in our busy lives, this is what people want to do.
Yes, yes. So for that, I would recommend that, first of all, SMS access is something which is very undermined, but actually it has a lot of privacy data for you. So take the pain of going and reading the OTP and filling it in, but do not give that SMS access. Second thing is, immediately after the app is installed and it's up and running, you can go back to the settings and start disabling those permissions which are not needed. If it's a scanning app, you need the camera access, but why do you need location access? You can immediately figure it out. Another thing is the bigger players usually are very careful in taking accesses because a lot of bad media can happen. The problems are with those less famous apps because they are greedy in taking the access, and then they try to take all the accesses because they know that if they ask it subsequently, they wouldn't get it. So this is, by the way, Sonal, this is only for those where you are authorizing, right? Where you have to be careful. There's another kind, which is unauthorized access. So the doorways usually happen through, for example, a link will come to you, and that link will show iloveindia.com, something like that. So the viewers should understand that what is most important is there's something called TLD, but you see the name, the host name which shows up when you're loading any page. The last thing that appears just before the dot is called TLD. That's a top level domain like .com, .org, .net, .in, etc.
Okay.
The one just before that is what we call domain name. That domain name is what all the companies own. So if the subdomain, which comes even before that, shows you some recognizable names like Google, Apple, Android, Flipkart, Amazon, please beware of those. The second one is what is very critical.
Don't blindly just accept them thinking it's the big firm.
Yes, because they often try to portray just like the actual site would. So they show you as a, like say if somebody is trying to do a phishing attack.
Well, isn't that how a lot of online fraud and financial fraud actually happens as well? But we'll come back to that. Hold that thought. I'll come back to that. I want to bring in Snehanshu Gandhi at this point. So you're the co-founder of Kaagaz Scanner app. Well, last program when we were discussing cybersecurity, we got so much of feedback on what the CAM scanner was doing and how much of risk it was to actually be putting out at a time when people are actually discussing digital lockers, upload all your data, free yourself of paperwork. That is something you can carry with yourself in your international travels, in the country as well, where you don't need that paperwork. But how safe is that? It was banned, just to refresh our viewers' memory, and then it came back again with a different name. So what are companies like you internally having a conversation about the fact that now people are beginning to question? There is a wave and there's a churning going on, and people are saying, well, this has been going on for too long. There needs to be some sort of mechanism in place where all this data is not just freely taken away.
Right. So thanks, Sonal. As you rightly said, I mean, this was a challenge that got CAM scanner banned last year as well. In 2019, so it was banned from Google Play Store by Google, and then it came back. And that's been a problem with scanning apps earlier as well. And we are very conscious about that. That's why Kaagaz Scanner, first of all, it works completely offline. So your data stays on your phone. It doesn't go to any cloud server. If you don't have internet, it will still work. And the idea is we don't want to take your data to anywhere. It's your data. It should stay on your phone. And the other important thing that we are focusing on.
Do you have access to those pages then?
No, we don't have. So we don't have access. It's on your phone. We don't know what you have put there. It is completely offline. If you don't access internet and still use the app, the data cannot flow to any servers anywhere. You don't have to worry about all those things in case of Kaagaz Scanner. And the framework that we're using is, we use a 3 C's framework. We call it, so it's first is choice, second is consent, and third is control. So the idea is that it should be your choice, even when we introduce a cloud storage in future, where you will be able to back up your documents onto a cloud server, so that something happens to your phone, you still have access to your documents from another device, etc. You don't lose your documents. With that intent, we'll be introducing a cloud storage, but it will be very consent based. That if you, first is you have a choice to completely remain, you don't have to use the cloud.
But do you really have a choice?
If you want,
but I'm not very convinced. Do you really have a choice?
Right.
And Viraj Gupta, who's an advocate and a cyber law expert, come in on this one. We are talking about how if, say, this particular app, the Kaagaz scanner app that he's talking about, maybe they are not taking my data, but some other app might have access to my pictures. And if it's on my device, it's out there.
So no, it's about also the intent of developers.
Let Mr. Gupta respond to that, please. I'll come back to you. Let Mr. Gupta respond to that. He hasn't spoken.
Hi, Sonal. The simple question is, what is source of revenue? Whether Mr. Gandhi or any other company or any other app, ultimately they are getting, because they are not paid services. So what is their source of revenue? Ultimately, directly, indirectly, consented or without consent, they are getting and collecting the data. Now, my previous panelists, Mr. Amit and Saurabh, they both spoken about the security aspects and the private mobile phone. I will discuss this issue from the larger perspective, national security, then legal and regulatory framework. Out of previously, as per previous data, some 81% mobile phones were Chinese. Now 72% mobile phones are Chinese. Now government came with a scheme for 40,000 crore rupees subsidy for mobile manufacturers. That is called PLI scheme. Now there are 3-4 government rules and regulations. Mr. Amit spoken about the cyber cafe rules. Now cyber cafe rules, it applies to the public data network, public Wi-Fi, whether it will be responsibility of the metro network and other government Wi-Fi network to get the data of those persons who are using the Wi-Fi system. Now for the government officers, there is a Public Records Act, and in my petition in 2014, in the Govindachar matter, government framed email policy and the IT policy. Now as per that IT policy, government officers cannot use that mobile in which this internet is connected, because that government data can be compromised. So there is the sensitive personal data which cannot be compromised.
But it should apply to citizens as well. It should apply to citizens as well. And I think what you're trying to say is also that there is a bit of ambiguity, and also please remember, there is no global sort of law that governs all of this. There is no control, there is no set standard really that can apply to it. I have last 30 seconds. I just want to bring in Amit Dubey. Amit, he raised a very important point, Mr. Gupta, about the fact that what is the revenue model then? And you know, we've discussed this earlier where we said that if the app is free, remember that you become the product and your data is being sold. Last 30 seconds to you, please.
Sonal, I think I mentioned this last time as well. Even if the application developers, they are not sourcing your data, they are writing on different SDKs. And these SDK guys, they have data probes and they collect this data and pay to this application developer. So there are multiple such methods through which this data is sourced. I think we need a very clear-cut law, which I think Viragji has also mentioned, because we don't know the complete business strategies of these applications. That's why the law is missing many of these aspects. And the real owners, who should be the owner of this data leak or privacy, we simply blame on this application developers or host server, all these things. So I think a law which can explain the clear-cut responsibilities of this data movement at different level, I think that should be required.
Yeah, in fact, Amit,
that is
on that
required,
point,
need of the hour,
Europe, for example, has the GDPR, which is...
I have to leave it there, gentlemen. I promise to return back because there's so much still to be looked into, how our data is actually going out of our hands and being sold freely. We've all become products here. So thank you so much for joining us today. We'll come back to this and discuss more aspects of cybersecurity and data mining. For now, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you again tomorrow morning, 11:30. Bye-bye.